Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
3,000 years ago, in a hot, dry land called the Valley of Elah, time seemed to stop. A small, smooth stone just left a leather sling flying through the air very fast. A young shepherd boy, not a soldier, held the sling. He stood against a huge, powerful warrior. This warrior was like a killing machine, very tall and strong. He wore heavy armor and carried big weapons. Everyone watched from the hills, believing the small boy had no chance. It looked like the shepherd was walking to his certain death. The odds seemed completely impossible for him to win. This was a fight that no one believed the shepherd could survive. But what if the story you think you know is not exactly right? Most people remember this famous fight as a simple story. A small person, an underdog, wins against a big, strong enemy, a giant bully. We use the names David and Goliath often for any fight where one side seems much weaker than the other. But sometimes what looks like an amazing, impossible win has hidden facts. What if the giant was not as powerful as he seemed? What if he was actually the one with a serious problem, a hidden weakness? And what if the shepherd boy had a very powerful secret, a strategic advantage that no one saw at first? What if our memory of this event is wrong? This book will explore this ancient story very carefully. We will use tools from history, science, and archaeology to look for the real truth. We will search for answers in old writings, in the land where the battle happened, and from things found buried in the earth. Many people think this is just a simple story of good versus evil, a clear miracle, but we will find new ideas and maybe even a different truth. This is a journey to understand one of the most famous and important battles in all human history. We will see if what we believe about this old tale is true, or if there is much more to learn about this amazing event and its real meaning. 2. The two armies. The Valley of Elah stretched between two rocky ridges, its dry streambed filled with smooth stones. To the north, the Israelite soldiers had set up their camp. To the south, their enemies, the Philistines, stood ready. These two armies faced each other across the wide, empty space of the valley. It was a place where battle seemed sure to happen, yet for many days, nothing did. The Philistines were a powerful group of people. They were not from the local lands, but had traveled from places like Greece or other parts of the Mediterranean Sea many years ago. They built grand cities, such as Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath. Their civilization was quite advanced for their time. They were experts in working with metal, creating strong iron weapons and heavy armor for their soldiers. This technology made their army very difficult to defeat. In contrast, the Israelites were mainly mountain people. They lived in the hill country to the east of the valley. They were a group of tribes, and at this time, they had a new king named Saul. The Israelites had simpler weapons, mostly made of bronze and wood, not the strong iron the Philistines used. Their army was less well-equipped, and their soldiers were not as used to fighting large, organized battles against such technologically advanced enemies. The armies stayed on their hills, watching each other, For 40 long days, no soldier from either side entered the valley to fight. This was a deadlock, a frozen moment of fear and waiting. Every morning and every evening, a giant Philistine warrior named Goliath would come out. He stood between the armies and shouted insults and challenges. He asked for one Israelite champion to fight him alone. Goliath's loud voice and huge size filled the Israelite camp with terror. King Saul, their leader, felt a great fear, and so did all his men. They were afraid to answer Goliath's challenge. This fear kept them frozen on their hill, unable to move forward or retreat. The long standoff made everyone feel hopeless. It was clear that the rules of war had changed, and a new kind of bravery, one that defied old traditions, was desperately needed. 3. The big man. Goliath, the Philistine champion, stood out from everyone else. He was a truly giant man. Some ancient texts say he was 9 to 10 feet tall. Other old writings tell us he was 6 feet 9 inches tall. Even the smaller height was very, very big for people 3,000 years ago.
He wore a strong bronze helmet on his head. His body was covered in thick scale armor made of bronze. This heavy armor weighed about 125 pounds. That's like carrying a large dog or a small person on your body. He also had bronze guards on his legs for protection. Goliath carried a mighty spear. Its shaft was as thick as a weaver's beam, which was a heavy wooden bar used in weaving cloth. The spear's iron head alone weighed about 15 pounds. He also had a javelin, another throwing weapon, on his back. A special soldier walked in front of Goliath carrying an enormous shield. This made Goliath look even more powerful and protected. He seemed like an unmoving fortress. Every morning and evening for 40 days, Goliath would come to the valley floor. He would stand between the two armies and shout loud challenges. He called out insults to the Israelite soldiers, making fun of them. He wanted one Israelite champion to fight him alone. This type of fight, called single combat, was a way to decide big battles in ancient times. It meant that only 2 men would fight, one from each army. The winner would decide the fate of both armies, saving many lives from a full war. Goliath's offer was clear. If an Israelite champion could kill him, the Philistines would become servants to Israel. But if he won, Israel would become servants to the Philistines. The sight and sound of Goliath filled the Israelites with dread.
King Saul, their leader, and all his soldiers were dismayed and greatly afraid. Goliath seemed like an unstoppable force, a wall of bronze and iron that no one could pass. His loud words and terrifying presence made the experienced soldiers tremble. They felt it was impossible to defeat this huge warrior. Goliath stood as an unmoving mountain of muscle and metal, reinforcing the idea that no one could ever win against him. His challenge froze the Israelite army with fear day after day, showing them the apparent impossibility of victory. The small boy. David was not a soldier. He was a young shepherd from Bethlehem. His job was to watch his father's sheep. One day, David's father, Jesse, sent him to take food to his older brothers. They were soldiers in King Saul's army facing the Philistines in the valley of Elah. David carried bread and cheese.
When David arrived, he heard the giant Goliath shouting his challenge. All the Israelite soldiers were very afraid. David's older brother, Eliab, saw David and was angry. "Why are you here?" he asked. "You should be with your sheep." But David listened to Goliath's insults and asked about the reward. Soon, David was brought before King Saul. David said, "I will go and fight this Philistine." King Saul looked at David. He was just a small young boy. "You cannot fight him," Saul said. "You are too young, and Goliath is a lifelong warrior." But David explained he had killed lions and bears while protecting his sheep.
He had used his bare hands. "This giant will be like them," David said, "because he has insulted the living God of Israel." King Saul was persuaded. He offered David his own armor, a bronze helmet, a heavy coat of mail, and his sword. David tried on the king's armor. He walked a few steps, but it was too heavy and strange. He was not used to wearing such things. David took off the armor. He knew it was not the right way for him to fight. This was not a mistake. It was a strategic choice. He refused to fight by the usual rules of heavy soldiers. Instead, David picked up his shepherd's staff. He walked to the stream in the valley and found 5 smooth stones. He put them into his shepherd's bag. Then he took his sling in his hand. David walked towards the battlefield, towards Goliath. He wore only his simple tunic. He had no sword, no shield, no heavy armor. He carried only his wooden stick and his bag with 5 stones. Goliath saw the young boy coming. "Am I a dog," Goliath shouted, "that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David. The Israelite soldiers watched, silent and full of fear. They believed the small boy was walking directly to his death. 5. The secret weapon. This chapter will change how you think about David's secret weapon, the sling. Many people imagine a small boy with a simple toy, like a Y-shaped stick and a rubber band. But this idea is wrong. David's sling was not a toy at all. It was a very serious and dangerous weapon.
In ancient times, a sling like David's was like a handgun. It was a strong tool for war, used by soldiers in armies. The sling was made from a leather pouch or woven cloth. 2 long cords were attached to it. A stone, or sometimes a lead ball, went into the pouch. The slinger would spin the sling very fast, then let go of one cord. This action launched the stone with amazing speed and power. A skilled slinger could hit or seriously hurt a target far away, up to 200 yards. Roman soldiers even had special tools to pull sling stones out of bodies because they went in so deep. The power from a good sling was truly scary. Some people say a sling stone could travel as fast as a professional baseball pitcher throws. It hit with the power of a large gun, like a .45 caliber bullet. This means David was not just a lucky shepherd. He was a projectile warrior. He fought by throwing things from a distance. Goliath, on the other hand, was a heavy infantryman. He was covered in heavy bronze armor. His armor alone weighed about 125 pounds. He carried a big sword and a javelin. Goliath was dressed and ready for a close fight, where 2 men would stand near each other and hit with swords or spears. He expected David to come down the hill armed like him, to fight face to face. But David did not fight that way. He came running down the hill without heavy armor. He did not carry a sword. He did not stop to shout insults or wait for Goliath to get close.
As he ran, he was already putting a stone into his sling. Goliath was slow and heavy. He probably had trouble seeing clearly, especially with the sun in his eyes. He expected a close fight. He did not see a fast, unarmored person at a distance as a real danger at first. By the time Goliath understood what was happening, David's stone was already flying through the air. Think of it like this. It was a gunfight. David had the sling, which was like a powerful gun. Goliath had his sword and spear, which were like knives. In such a fight, the person with the knife usually does not have a chance against the person with the gun. So the miracle of David's victory was not just luck. It was because David used superior military technology and a very smart battle plan. He knew how to fight his enemy in a way Goliath did not expect. He did not play by Goliath's rules, and that made all the difference. 6. The giant's sickness. We looked at David's secret weapon, the sling. Now let's look closer at Goliath. The old stories about him have some strange parts. They make us ask questions. Why did Goliath need another man to walk in front of him and carry his big shield? Most champion fighters carried their own shields. This detail is very unusual. Then, when Goliath first saw David coming, he shouted. He said, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" But David only had one staff, his shepherd's stick, and his sling. Why did Goliath say sticks, plural, if David only had one?
This small detail is a big clue. It makes us think Goliath could not see very well. Perhaps he saw David's staff and the sling's cords as many sticks. Doctors and scholars have studied these old texts. They have a theory about Goliath. What if Goliath was not just a very tall man, but a sick man? They think he might have had a medical condition called acromegaly. This condition makes a person grow very large, sometimes reaching heights like Goliath's. It happens when a small part of the brain, called the pituitary gland, has a tumor. This tumor makes the body produce too much growth hormone. If Goliath had acromegaly, the same tumor that made him so huge could also have hurt his eyes. This kind of tumor often presses on the nerves that help us see. This would make Goliath's eyesight poor. He might have been half blind or had very bad side vision. He would have found it hard to see things clearly, especially things far away or moving quickly. This explains what he needed an attendant to carry his shield. It also explains why he thought David was carrying sticks instead of just one staff and a sling. This idea changes how we see the whole fight. Goliath was not just a big, scary fighter. He was a man with a serious sickness. His huge size, which seemed like his greatest strength, was actually a sign of his weakness. It meant he was slow, heavy, and could not see his enemy well.
He was ready to fight a close-up battle with swords and spears, but he could not even properly see David, who was coming with a fast, distant weapon. So David's victory was not just about his powerful sling. It was also about Goliath's hidden sickness. Goliath could not see David clearly until it was too late. The giant, who seemed so powerful and unbeatable, was in fact very vulnerable. His impressive strength was a disadvantage in this kind of fight. It made him slow and unable to adapt. The very thing that made him a giant also made him blind to the real danger. This new way of looking at the story tells us something important. Sometimes what looks like great strength might actually be a weakness, and what seems like a small problem might actually be a huge advantage. Goliath was not a terrifying monster without any problems. He was a sick man who was chosen to fight, but he could not truly see his enemy until the fight was almost over. 7. Searching for the truth. After thinking about old ideas and sickness, we now look at real places. Scientists and workers dig in the earth. They search for clues about the time of David and Goliath. These modern digs happen at places like Tel Es-Safi and Khirbet Qeiyafa. They help us learn about the past. Khirbet Qeiyafa is an old fortified city. It sits on a hill overlooking the valley of Elah, exactly where the famous fight is said to have happened. Archaeologists found strong walls and 2 gates here.
They used special tests to find out how old these things were. The tests showed the city was built between about 1020 and 980 years before Christ. This is exactly the era of King David. The place looked very military, not just a quiet village. Also, inside this city, they did not find pig bones or human figures. This is important. Israelites did not eat pork or worship many idols. These findings are different from what Philistines and other groups did. This suggests that Israelite people lived in Khirbet Qeiyafa. Its Hebrew name, Sharaim, meaning 2 gates, is also mentioned in the ancient story. Tel Es-Safi is another important place. This is where ancient Gath used to be, Goliath's hometown. Workers led by Ar and Meir have been digging there for many years. They found old pottery pieces from the 10th or 9th centuries before Christ. On these pieces there were names similar to Goliath. This tells us that people with such names lived in Philistine Gath around the time of the story. Also, new findings showed that the width of Gath's city walls was about 7 feet 10 inches. Some experts think Goliath's described height, though changed in different old texts, might have been a way to show he was as big and strong as the city itself. These discoveries also help us understand the Philistines better. For a long time, people thought Philistines were wild and not smart, but the digs show this is not true.
Philistines were a complex and clever people. They made good pottery and were very skilled at working with metals like iron. They built big cities with good plans and traded with many lands across the Mediterranean Sea. Recent studies of old bones even suggest that the Philistines originally came from places like Greece or other parts of Europe, migrating a long time ago. They were not uncultured brutes, but a sophisticated people with a rich culture. So, while parts of the story of David and Goliath might have become bigger over many years, the main things are rooted in fact. The valley, the 2 armies, and the people like David and Goliath were real. The places they lived and fought were real. These findings help us understand that the story is more than just a legend. It has roots in real history and real events from long ago. These discoveries make the old story feel closer to us and show that the battle was part of a real historical conflict. 8. Why this story matters. The story of David and Goliath has lasted 3,000 years. It teaches a powerful lesson about underdogs. These are people who seem weaker but face strong opponents. This story touches a part of human life everyone knows, meeting an impossible challenge. Anyone who has felt like the smaller party in a dispute or a small business against a huge one has lived inside this story. Its long life shows that facing big problems is common.
The story helps us rethink what we believe is strong or weak. Goliath seemed very powerful. He was large, armored, and a skilled fighter. Everything suggested he would win easily. David seemed weak. He was young, small, unarmored, and alone. Every sign suggested he would lose. But the story says these first ideas were wrong.
What seems like strength can be a weakness. Looks like weakness can be a great strength. For example, Goliath's great size made him slow and perhaps hurt his eyesight, possibly due to acromegaly. David's small size meant he was fast and could move freely. He used his special weapon, the sling, with great skill. The writer Malcolm Gladwell explains that giants are not always as strong as they seem, and those who seem weak, like a shepherd, are not always as weak as they look. Disadvantages can become advantages if we choose not to fight by the opponent's usual rules. The battle of David and Goliath changed how we think about big challenges. It showed that obvious power does not always win. The real factors that decide outcomes are often hidden. Big armies, companies, and individuals often make Goliath's mistake. They think they will always win in the same way. They do not prepare for changed rules. David refused to fight on old terms. This is the deepest gift of the story. It tells us power can be surprising. It insists the world is not always as clear as it looks.
It also teaches about a special courage from believing you act for something greater than yourself. So, when you see a contest, how certain are you about who is truly stronger?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.